Welcome to the Queen City Music Podcast, the podcast devoted to the local music scene in Charlotte, North Carolina. Now, here's your host, Matthew Ablin.
Hello, and welcome to episode 74 of the Queen City Music Podcast. This episode of the Queen City Music Podcast is sponsored by Midwood Guitar Studio, Charlotte, North Carolina's own boutique guitar shop located in Plaza Midwood. Midwood Guitar Studio not only has the finest selection in boutique guitars, but familiar names like Fender, Martin, Taylor, Two Rock, and many others. Whether it's a guitar, bass, amp, effects pedal, or a much-needed accessory, the knowledgeable and friendly staff at Midwood Guitar Studio will help guide you in the right direction for your next purchase. And now, they also have a luthier on staff for all your repair needs. Visit their website at midwoodguitarstudio.com or stop in to see their unique shop at 1517 Central Avenue, Charlotte, North Carolina. By the way, if you're a fan of the podcast and want to find out more about me, head over to MatthewAblin.com. There you'll find links to my events calendar, current and past podcast episodes, my performance groups, and a whole host of other information. This month on episode 74 of the QCMP, I'm speaking with media composer, multi-instrumentalist, and former music educator Scott McLaughlin. And in recent years, Scott has been keeping busy composing for film. Scott McLaughlin, welcome to the Queen City Music Podcast.
Thank you so much, Matthew.
So, Scott, it's so good to see you again, man. We are former educators together.
Yes, we are.
So we used to get to see each other every once in a while at our in-services. So.
Yes. I've always enjoyed your work ethic, your intellect, your get-it-done attitude, all of that. So this is a big honor.
Thank you, man. I learned a lot working with you and checking out some of the stuff that you've done as well. I've got a question for you.
Yes.
Are you originally from the Charlotte area?
I am originally from the Charlotte area, one of two people, probably.
Wow. You are probably, I can add you to the two hands of people that I know.
Yes.
That's hysterical.
Yes.
So what's your music background, Scott?
Well, my music background is a little bit varied, but basically fifth grade band, started percussion, played all the way through high school, went to college, and then during these summers, I would always play at Carowinds, back when they had live bands.
Okay.
So I did 6 seasons there with different bands, different, permutations of musicians, things like that. And then somewhere along the way, I played for 2 years with a fabulous singer-songwriter 6 nights a week in lounges called Daryl Rice.
Okay.
And we ended up in the Radisson downtown. And then somewhere along the way, I played with a very popular, successful rock band called Sugar Creek, and we would go up and down the East Coast.
Oh, wonderful.
Did that for a little bit over a year.
You're playing drums?
Drums, yes. Okay. Yeah. And then recorded many albums, went to the Ice Capades, did that about a year and a half, quit, came back to Charlotte, co-formed a band called Flight 108, a jazz rock fusion band with Fred Story and Ben Williams and Andre Ferreri and Rick Blackwell and Dave Lale, and recorded 4 albums and opened for a lot of people, including Ray Charles and Earl Clue and Dave Sanborn and Livingston Taylor and others.
I'm curious, though. Can I circle back?
Sure.
Ice Capades.
Yeah.
How did you get that gig? What was that like as a touring musician? So I'm guessing you were part of the band that played baskets, people were dancing.
Yeah. Well, actually, one of the seasons at Carowinds, there was a dancer in the show that got the assistant director job. And as a joke, I said, hey, see if you can give me the gig. Yeah. So the next thing I know, the guy from Santa Monica, California was flying in to hear me play. He hired me on the spot. Next thing I know, I'm on a plane to Atlantic City where I have to learn a 2.5-hour show with top
musicians.
And so it was sort of a trial by fire.
Right.
Yeah. And so we toured all over the United States,
So it's almost like playing a theater gig where you have the same score?
Same
thing every night?
Yeah, but it was 6 nights a week. It was in coliseums.
Wow.
And it was
Sorry, my cat just knocked over the microphone.
The cat is Shanghai things here. So it was basically a traveling corps of a director, drummer, myself, assistant director that played the keyboards, and then we would have musicians in the local union that
he's back.
I think the cat wants to be interviewed.
Yeah.
So basically my role was playing drums and keeping everything together because it was like a big band format. And then there was a whole orchestra on tape, so we all played to a click.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So like in Fort Worth, it was like guys from Buddy Rich's big band that were like slumming it to play with the Ice-Capades. And so one thing I did was look at the TV monitor, and because I had to catch all the different things that the different performers were doing, as well as play the music, like when somebody's jumping up or landing.
Interesting.
Or the clown doing something. So
I did read a interview about somebody who they filled in. They weren't their regular performer. And they were doing a Cirque du Soleil for a bit. And they said it was a fantastic experience, but they didn't think they could do it because it was kind of monotonous doing the same thing all the time.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes just being a musician, sometimes a lot of it becomes monotonous if you're performing.
Yeah.
It's like these are the set lists. This is what I've got to do. This is what I've got to put out.
But see, one thing that was implicitly super cool about that is you were in different cities every week.
Right.
So I would go, and I had plenty of, obviously friends and buddies that were in the show.
Yeah.
So I would go what I would call anthropological digs.
Yeah.
So, Seattle, Portland, Quebec, San Francisco, wherever I would get to know the city because we were there for a whole week. And so, and I made good money.
There you go. That's always a bonus. That's always a plus.
Yeah.
All right, so let's fast forward. You're in Charlotte.
Mm-hmm.
You've come back from the Ice-Capades. You're performing with Sugar Creek, and you're doing all these gigs as a musician. I know you as Scott McLaughlin, a music educator, besides some of the other things that you've done. I know that you did TV and did film scoring things. Well, I want to get into it in a little bit, but how do you get into music education?
Well, I had a business that I formed out of getting my BA in percussion with Phil Dodgen and Gary Dodgen, and it was called Music Tracks. And we were in a studio that is no longer around, but it was like the preeminent sort of commercial production studio called J. Howard Production Audio.
Okay.
And so we had sort of a room in there, and we were sort of the in-service music wing.
Wow.
So I ended up scoring commercials for Duke Power and many other things I'm drawing a blank on. But Duke Power and let me check my notes here. Anyway, lots of different commercials, and one thing that I learned from that was the collaborative nature of working with other professionals, and really fell in love with that, and that sort of segued into the composing for media or the composing for film because it's a team effort.
Right, and you were talking about before we started recording that you had done some composition stuff in college.
Yeah, so I studied some composition and I wrote some pieces and won, some little awards within the college.
Okay.
And that sort of whet my appetite. And then that was when we formed Music Tracks. And so Belks and Ivies and some of it's coming back now, Piedmont Natural Gas and Parades and just a very varied assortment of things.
I would imagine, given our age, that the composition was not focused on media. It wasn't involved with film and that kind of thing. I don't think those programs it really existed much back then, I'm guessing.
That was right at the beginning of MIDI.
Okay.
And so the studio was still tape, and sometimes we would literally record onto tape, and then 5 of us would stand around and push faders. It's sort of like memorize the mix
Yeah.
because you couldn't automate.
But were you guys, your composition stuff that you did in school, was that geared towards media, like
No,
film and television and that
no.
kind of stuff? It was more like classically oriented
Yeah,
things is kind of what I'm imagining.
Yeah. So it was sort of two different learning curves.
Yeah. Because I know there's a certain point, probably, I don't know, mid sometime in the 90s maybe. I mean, it might have started in the late 80s into the 90s, early 2000s. This is when there was a push in some of the colleges where they started having pop music degrees.
Yes.
You could go in and become a performer. You weren't studying classical or jazz. You were going to study pop music.
Right.
And you were going to do this.
Yes.
That was around the same time as school. I don't know if you ever heard of it. MIT, Musicians Institute of Technology, or it was GIT and DIT for drums.
Now, wasn't that in Hollywood?
It is in Hollywood, yes.
I've been there.
Have you?
I didn't go there, but I've been there.
I always wanted to go. I mean, I always had this thing when I was a young kid. I want to go there and I'll become a shredder. And it never happened. But it's just very funny how these different programs popped up to fulfill a need. And I know now you can even go to school for film composition.
Oh, yeah.
It's a thing.
I mean, at School of the Arts in Winston-Salem, they have a big program.
Do they really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Some of these programs are just, it's so amazing to me that the programs are there. They've just started to fill out. Here's the need. We're gonna provide a degree for this.
Right. And there's a crop. I mean, the younger generation, so to speak, they are so equipped with all of this because they grew up with the internet. They grew up with MIDI technology. They grew up with digital technology. So, and it's just amazing what's going on. It's a true renaissance.
So for you, I'm guessing it's a learning curve.
Yes.
You start, you're doing all this stuff, and then the digital format comes in, and you've got to learn how to do it all.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Because it's like you're wearing multiple hats now.
Was it, well, I guess the technology started, so you had to start to learn the technology, and then, of course, over the last, let's say, 20 years, that technology has just changed and changed and changed. So you're always, once you got used to one thing, it would change again. And then
it's a little bit like education.
That is true.
Yes.
What was it like changing all those different learning curves with the technology?
Actually, it gets easier and easier because I'm just amazed at what you can do now. What used to be when we would do commercials for what I was referring to before, they would have to film on film.
Right.
Then they would have to go down to Atlanta to Crawford Post, where they would take the A roll and the B roll, and they would put the commercial together then. Now you can do everything from your bedroom.
Yeah.
Everything.
I know.
There's films I've worked on where I don't even meet the people. I'm just talking to them on the phone or texting, and I just send them out the stuff. They send me the footage or the picture, and then I compose to it, send it to them. They make their notes, I make my changes, and we're off to the races.
I did talk, shameless plug, on episode 66 of the Queen City Music Podcast.
Yes.
Jason Hausman was on. Do you know Jason Hausman at all?
Yes, he's very good. I know him peripherally.
Okay. Wonderful fella. And
great.
I was talking to him about some of the same things that we were talking about with the learning curve with technology, because when he got into the industry as well, there were a lot of things just starting to percolate as when you started to do it as well.
I remember when 1 meg was a lot of memory.
I remember when I started getting into the recording thing, it was probably sometime in the late 90s. My friend turned me on to Cakewalk. And I was like, okay, I'm going to start recording some stuff. And I learned how to do it. And then it recorded, and then something happened. I couldn't get it to work again. And I just threw the whole thing away for years. And then until I got into Pro Tools years later.
Well, see, one thing you have to realize, or I had to realize, was that there's always going to be challenges. I'm facing challenges right now back at home on something I'm working on. Not the movie. It's a production music thing. And so I'm going to have to have to solve that. So, it's just like there's learning curves, and then there's the ghost in the machine syndrome.
So the studio work, are you mostly doing it in the box, meaning on your computer, or are you got a lot of microphones and things like that you record instruments and things?
All of the above.
All of the above.
Yes. I do some in the box. I record, some percussion stuff sometimes, record sounds on instruments. Also, there's a guy that I collaborate with a lot named Eric Lovell, who's
okay.
a local,
I know that name, yes.
Yeah, local fantastic musician, had Gigi Dover and Big Love. He's with the Thurston Howell Band. He's recorded countless albums. He's produced countless albums and plays all of these varied stringed instruments such as you do.
Anything with strings and a fret on it.
Yes.
All right, so let's get into the film composition. You talked a little bit about getting into composing. How did you wind up getting into the film thing? Because as we talked about, you were in music education for quite some time, and although I knew you as an educator, or know you as an educator,
yes,
I also we would have side conversations about different things that we would do when we were at end services. And one of the things you told me about was the composition, how you do stuff for film. So how'd you get into that? Because that's an area I am super interested in, kind of like starting to dip my feet into at some point. How do you get into that?
Well, are you ready for a long answer?
I am.
Okay.
That's why we're here.
Okay. So basically, when I was in Escapades, I ended up recording with some of the other musicians that I was touring with.
Okay.
And what we did was I recorded some of my compositions and used the sound man and all of that. Then with that demo tape, I parlayed that into my first movie gig, which was a very fabulous movie about acne. And it was back in the film days, which means that it was one of those films that you would actually watch in the school library.
So was that something that you got approached to do, or was that something were you starting to actively seek out composition?
At that point, I sought it out and I got the gig. But then that was just sort of a one-off. And then later on, we formed Music Tracks, which I think I told you about.
Yeah.
And then during that time, over the years, I've done documentaries, shorts, dramedies, quirkies, sort of quirky scores.
Right.
I've finished my first feature. I've got another 2 that are in the works. One's going to start filming in May, and one is in negotiations for this summer. And podcast, YouTube content, lots of stuff. So the journey, it was an advancement from projects leading to the other.
Yeah.
So your original question was,
how did you get into the film? And you were talking about the acne film. We'll just call it acne. But out of curiosity, so let's say you do that film.
Mm-hmm.
Was something that you had sought out to do?
Yes.
Okay. So as that project moves, and now you're like, okay, I got this under my belt. How do you start getting other work? How do you get into that world, as it were, where people are going to offer you, or you can petition to get work? How does that work?
That's a good question. It's sort of like a gigging musician. In other words, you play one gig, someone hires you from that gig, and then it's sort of exponential. So that with film scoring, that's sort of how it's worked with me.
Okay.
I did many years ago, I did a 48-hour film festival.
Yes.
And which was, by the way, all from my bedroom, all not even going on set. And so as a result of that, that ended up getting me some work with INSP. It ended up getting me another movie. Then from that movie, someone from that movie hired me for another, and I've done many other just sort of people from the crew or from the director or whatever recommended me to someone else.
Okay.
And so it's really sort of word of mouth. I haven't really I do have a website. I have sort of tried to promote, but frankly, the website has only gotten me one gig, which is a big movie that's going to be filmed in May.
Yeah, but I think the other thing about a website is you don't know how many people are looking at it.
Yeah, and it's respectable. It's a respect. In other words, it gets you respect, and it's a way to get your message out there.
Yeah, so you might not get work through the website,
Right.
as I air quote,
Yes.
but what'll happen is people will check out your work and then say, okay, this person was recommended to me. Let me check out their work. And then it'll percolate, in other areas.
Exactly.
And then you might not even know, if you got 5 gigs through your website and you don't even know.
Yes,
about it,
yes, yeah.
And if it's one thing I realized, one of my old websites from a number of years ago, so I would put these sound clips and videos up, and you could see through their analytics at the time how long people stayed on each video. And I would put up these, full song clips of me performing so that I could get gigs. And I started to realize after checking these analytics over time is that the average people sat and listened was 10 seconds or something, like maybe even shorter.
Well, maybe they decided to hire you after 10 seconds.
Yeah, well, but the point is they just want to see that you can do what you're saying you do.
Yeah.
They're not going to sit and listen to a 2-minute clip.
They don't have time.
Yeah. They're like, can they do what they're saying that he can do? Oh, okay, they sound good. Let's hire them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, somebody might be clipping through, listening through some of your sound clips, because I know you've got a whole array on your website. And some of the things I've listened to, I'm like, okay, cool. I might not have listened to the entire 30-second clip or 1 minute clip.
I don't think I would either.
Yeah. But you just want to see what it's like,
Sure.
and what your range is of stuff that you've done composition for. Mm-hmm. All right, so let's talk about this. So you start getting more and more gigs. And time is passing. The studio starts changing. What are you adding to the studio now that you haven't had before? So are you totally in the box? We were saying, you do both. But do you have outboard gear? Like, do you have compressors and equalizers outside of do you have hardware, basically?
Yeah, actually, that is all in the box. However, I am in the midst, like now, of building an isolation booth that I will be using for, recording guitar or cello or voice, things like that. Whereas before, I've just done it out in the room and then use RX or my isotope to sort of, change the parameters to try to create a better recording environment. But so in answer to your question, I've done a lot of stuff at Eric Lovell's over the years, but I'm wanting to do more at my place.
More in-house, as it were.
And so bring more people to me rather than go to another studio.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Have you done all the soundproofing, all that kind of stuff that you need to do? Or are you like me, kind of like, it's all in the box, I'm not really worried about that all right now?
Yeah, partially. I do have a lot of gobos or whatever you call it, sound absorbing panels that are on the wall, and some bass traps. But I'm literally going to build, which I'm buying these soundproof blankets that are specifically for sound.
Yeah.
They're really thick. And so, and then I'm using this structure that I made. And so it's going to be, a little primitive, but it'll still be functional.
That's okay. I mean, if you go online, I'm kind of thinking that might be a summer project for me as well. Yeah. I might put a little cloud overhead and some sound panels in so that I can get better sound. So even when I'm recording some of my own music, I can do, get the best quality that I want. You go on YouTube, there's plenty of videos and of guys showing you how to build the stuff. And all you've got to do is buy the materials, have the tools, and willing to spend the time putting the stuff together.
Yeah,
and I think you'd be good to go. It's not rocket science.
Yeah, I mean, I made a bunch from plywood, insulation, and then cloth that I got from Mary Jane's or Mary Jo's cloth place in Belmont.
Yeah,
and then stable gun and it works well. And, it may not be from an audiophile standpoint, it may be, they could bring a dB meter and all that. It may not work as well as it probably should, but I can notice a difference.
Absolutely. Yeah. All the little things really just help the quality of sound. You don't think about it. Even when I'm recording vocals, I've got a little vocal panel, and then I've got my little door over here, and you open it, and I've got my little library of books, and then you can just, it's not a vocal booth.
But it diffuses the sound waves.
Yeah, it really does.
Right.
Every little bit helps to get the sound. So you're getting into this recording, and you're adding, your studio's getting a little larger. You're learning, new programs as all this kind of stuff is coming out, and you're getting new jobs.
Yes.
How do you get in? This is the thing I struggle with. So you get a film,
yes,
or even let's just say a clip of something you have to put sound to. How do you figure out what's got to go there?
Well, is the emotion, is the story. So in other words, you, let me say this feature I did called Torn, which is a psychological drama.
Okay.
I started out by reading the script.
Okay.
And so that was before they had even shot anything. And reading the script, I got so inspired, I would stop, put the script down, run in, and record a cue from that particular point because I felt the emotion. Because you're telling a story through music.
Right.
And so then what I did was I put together like 15 different pieces of music, sent it to the director, and a lot of it ended up in the movie.
Wow.
So in answer to your question, you're looking at a clip. You're looking, and through discussions with the writer, the screenwriter, the director, whoever is sort of the decision maker of the tone of the movie or the film, they usually do not talk in musical terms. They talk in emotion. They talk in motion.
Right.
With me, I just try to capture the emotion.
Okay.
And there's different ways to do that. You can come from the internal dialogue of the protagonist.
Right.
That may or may not be revealed, but the music will tell it.
So you brought a clip from Torn.
Yes.
Can we take a listen to one of the clips and hear what you're talking about?
Sure.
Which clip did you want to check out?
So the first one would be, this is 1 minute and 10 seconds. This is a portion of a scene where Peter, played by Jordan Alexander, who's the protagonist, is speaking at a AA meeting about his challenges, and it shows his tender side. And so there's mangled cello, which leads to a theme on the guitar. Well, this is another thing, because what I like to do is have different themes throughout the movie that sort of work together.
Right.
So this theme on the guitar was established early on in the movie as sort of when you were having sympathy for Peter and his issues.
So is it Peter's theme, as it were?
Yeah, I called it Peter's sympathetic theme.
Okay.
And so that surfaces, and then it's embellished a little bit. And basically that's it. And it's sort of a heartfelt moment that shows his tender side.
Okay. Let's listen to Peter's sympathetic theme from the film Torn.
I'm an alcoholic. I thought that this was gonna have to be something that I would have to fix by myself. But Sheriff Lewis helped me to see that it didn't have to be that way. If I want to go home and see my son again, then I have to be sober. And yeah, that's why I'm here.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thanks.
Peter?
Hey.
How you doing, man? Kevin.
Hey, nice to meet you, Kevin.
I just want to let you know, bro, we're rooting for you, man.
Thanks, man.
That's pretty neat. That's pretty neat.
Cool, thank you.
How do you come up with it, though? Is it just something that a little inspiration from reading it, or do you have to? I guess what I'm trying to say is, do you work out several different ideas for what's going to be the final idea, besides what you give to the director or the people in film, on the film end, where they choose what they like?
I think part of it is instinctive. Part of it is listening to different references and sort of getting an idea of what this composer did, what that composer did, and then sort of putting it through the mangled brain of me. Right. And then through all of that, come up with something. Sometimes it comes easy. Sometimes it just flows out. Sometimes I have to work on it. I wish I would say that I was disciplined enough to come up with 10 different variations and all of that. Yeah. But usually I just go for it and then make adjustments from that.
Interesting. Because there is, as much it is for somebody else. I mean, you're creating this music on your end, and it's got to come out of your head and as you were saying, your interpretation of what this is like. Yes. So it's like songwriting. Mm-hmm. To please yourself, but unfortunately you have to please somebody else. Right. Or in other cases, other people beyond that one person. There's maybe different layers. Yes. Of that song construction.
Definitely.
And you had another piece from another segment from Torn that you brought?
Yeah, so Torn, just to give you a little background, was directed by an incredible director named Ryan W. Thomas, who I had a very synergistic and very cool experience with. Mm-hmm. In this scene, it is Morgan Freeman's son, who's Alfonso Freeman, who's playing the character of Sheriff Mike. Okay. So he is, this is a portion of the scene where Sheriff Mike, he's a co-lead with Peter, is confronting Peter with sort of a heartfelt and angry story. And so you can sort of see how the music will underscore that emotion. Okay. And in this particular clip, the music, and I think the others well, the music is pretty subtle. I try to be sort of transparent most of the time in the music because I'm trying to glean the immersive experience for the viewer. Yeah. I don't want the music to be the spotlight. It is the support.
Okay, let's take a listen to what is this segment called?
I would guess it would be Sheriff Mike's confession.
You know about hurting your family, wouldn't you, Mike? Did you do the same thing to your son that you did to Ned?
Oh, you tread lightly, boy.
You don't think that you'll be able to control what's inside?
You want to know what happened? 20 years ago, me and my boy coming back from a fishing trip. Some low-life drunk comes flying down the highway on the wrong side of the road. He hit his head on. Some coward who thought one more drink was more important than a life. And that life, my son. And there's not a minute, there's not a day that I wish that it wasn't my life instead of his.
That's pretty neat, Scott. I've got a question, though.
Sure.
All right, so you're listening to this music. Let's just say the last clip we were listening to. There's this sound underneath.
Yes.
I don't know what you call it. It's almost just like this long-held synthesized chord to build tension.
Yeah.
What do you call that?
You can call it a drone.
Okay.
You can call it a pad.
Okay.
Sometimes I will use numerous drones or numerous pads or attune them or mangle them or add flangers or reverse them or add lots of reverb. And sometimes it's just used as sort of a wash, sort of like if you were watercolor painting and you'd put just sort of a background of a wash in the background. Right. And you do your details on top. So it sort of fills in the sound field.
So it is... Is it almost like a soundscape? Because I've been listening
Sort
to
of.
a lot of soundscape stuff lately.
Yes.
And if you're not sure what a soundscape is, if you're listening to the podcast, soundscape's like if you walk into the chiropractor's office and they have this background music, or the massage therapist or something like that. They've got this sound going on in the back that's just kind of supposed to be relaxing. But then there are soundscapes, rain and wind, just to help you fall asleep.
Just ambient.
Ambient tones.
Yeah, ambient tones.
So is there a thing when you're composing for film that there are stock and trade things that everybody does, like drones and soundscapes to support a moment?
Well, without getting into the whole history of cinema music, it used to be that there was a lot more melodic, a lot more orchestral.
Yes.
And then it slowly, due to Hans Zimmer, due to a lot of people, sort of got more into sound design territory.
Yeah.
And so my natural leanings are towards tension, psychological drama, all of that. So it sort of fits in. But yeah, so in answer to your question, in contemporary, I'm sure someone would be able to argue against this, but in my opinion, in contemporary scoring, there's really becoming more and more this hybrid blend between sound design and melody and rhythmic motifs and things like that. And sometimes rather than the melodic motif,
Sure.
it might be a sound.
Yeah.
That's a signature sound, or it may be a way of processing the sound that becomes identifiable with a certain character.
Yeah, there's if you have any interest in film or film music, there's a great movie called, have you ever seen Score?
Yes, part of it.
Okay.
Yes.
And they have a podcast for it as well, but they talk about all sorts of things that have to do with scoring for film, and I got kind of into it for a little bit. So if you listen to certain or watch certain films and you just pay attention to the music, you can hear a change almost dramatically in what was going on at certain periods in time. So we'll take a cross section of films. If you take Sergio Leone Western films with Clint Eastwood in them, those old films from the 60s.
Yeah.
Oh my
Marconi.
gosh. Yeah,
Ennio
Marconi.
Morricone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
And Sergio Leone did the scores? Is that
No,
it?
it's Ennio Morricone did a lot of those spaghetti westerns.
Right, but
Yeah.
Sergio Leone was the director.
Yeah. And because Ennio Morricone, when I was in New York going to the Doc NYC festival, I saw a documentary about him, and he did over 100 films.
Wow.
And he was quite the innovator in in progressing film scoring.
Yeah. Another person, and I don't know all the names. You may well know the names a lot better than I do. You watch Planet of the Apes.
Yeah.
That score, from what I understand, was like groundbreaking at the time. It was like the sounds, what they did were really contemporary
Yes.
for that score.
There's a movie that's out now called Poor Things, and it's it did not win the award because Oppenheimer won it, which Oppenheimer's score was incredible as well, beyond incredible. But this movie was William Dafoe and I can't remember the lady, Mark Ruffalo, and it's a very stylized movie, and the music is incredibly strange, but in a good way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you start to pay attention more to music in the film, it'll really stand out more. But if you're just going for the film, you might not pay attention to what is even there. Like I remember when I was a kid, I was a huge Star Wars fan. I still am. My dad had gotten me the soundtrack on vinyl to Star Wars.
John Williams.
Of course. And I, at the time, being a kid, did not even realize there was music in the movie.
That's because he was doing his job, because it became part of the experience.
Yeah, I was just like, oh my gosh. And of course, you know, anything by John Williams is he's the god, as it were, of film composition that people look to. Like, this guy's 90-something years old. He's still doing film scores.
Right.
But another film that always comes to my mind with a great soundtrack, have you ever seen Steve McQueen in Bullitt?
Years ago. Yes.
Oh, there's a scene in the movie that would never, like, just the scene in the movie. He's in a bar restaurant with his girlfriend, and there's like I exaggerate, but there's like a 10-minute flute jazz solo to a band while they're in a bar looking across, and I'm like, this would never happen today. That this type of music, or let alone this scene, would be let to be this long.
I could sort of see Quentin Tarantino maybe doing that.
Yes, yes, a throwback. And that's funny when you see movies like a Tarantino, and he does throwbacks.
Yes.
Or some other film director who does a throwback. It's real interesting just to hear the music. You're like, that doesn't sound like anything today. You know?
Yeah, yeah.
One of the things, and it pops in my head. So I was teaching a couple of weeks ago, and I was showing this film to my kids. Yes, I know. I share film sometimes. Don't judge.
Yes.
So my kids they were looking at the beginning of Mary Poppins because we were talking about something. And one of my kids said, "What is this?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" There was like all the stuff in the beginning of the movie. And I said, "That's the film credits, who they say who's in the movie." They're like, "Why do they do that?" And I said, "Oh." I said, "Well, they don't do that anymore." They're like, "Yeah, they don't do that in movies anymore. That's always at the end."
Yes.
So like,
Yes.
you know, kids, even young ones they catch on to certain things.
Yes.
Yeah, they understand, like, oh, that's not part of today. That's old school, that they would have 10 minutes of credits before the film even started.
Yes.
You know, now it's like movie starts.
Yes. And now I watch all the way through the end of a movie and watch every single thing.
Wow.
You know,
you're that guy who stays in the theater watching all the
Oh,
credits?
exactly. Yes.
Is there any specific thing you're looking for?
Well, I'm looking for where it was recorded, where, you know, who the musicians were. But then also there's all sorts of really bizarre different roles, you know, insect wrangler, you know, stuff like that. But
yeah, there are.
On a shameless little plug for my son, he indirectly or directly works for Quentin Tarantino.
Okay.
Because in Hollywood, but not as a filmmaker, as a barista, but he's like in regular conversations with Quentin Tarantino, like every other day.
Is he trying to break into the film industry? Is that his thing?
It's a long story, but basically he has already done a number of things, and he's also doing a lot of graphic design for lots of stuff. But I could get into the proud father moment another time.
I mean, funny enough, my dad has a cousin, or had a cousin. I don't think he's no longer living. And he was kind of a big deal in Hollywood. He was a producer, as far as I understand. He produced old films like Ordinary People, like blockbusters. Like he was pretty big in the film industry, this guy, and he produced a lot of films at the time. I'd imagine that's just a hard. I mean, we talk about breaking into the music business, like that's got to be a hard business to try to get into.
It's a long-term plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's fortunately for us as musicians, I don't know how it is with the film industry, so I won't judge, or presume to know. At least in music, if you don't hit that 1% top tier fame,
you can still do gigs.
You can still do gigs and make a decent living.
Yes.
You know, you're a film composer. You could still do okay making extra money.
Yeah,
small films and things like that.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's a thing for actors or cinematographers. I mean, can they still do that? Is that a thing?
Well, what my son does, I can only speak for him, is, but he has many skills.
Right.
So he does tour posters for big bands. He does album covers. He does stuff for, you know, graphic design. He's doing some stuff for Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah.
He's doing lots of stuff. And he makes a pretty good living just from his computer.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, aren't we all fortunate? Because we all do on some level.
Yes.
I'm doing this podcast. You're doing recording.
Yes.
So different thing. So let's check out some of the other things you brought. You brought a couple other clips that we wanted to check out.
Sure. There is actually a film that I am now composing this week. I got to finish it up this week.
Okay.
It's called Grace, and
Okay.
it's from A1 Day One Productions. And The writer, the sound person, the guy who hired me is Andrew Smith, and the director is Anish Pinyanja.
Okay.
And I'm really butchering his name, but Anish. But the actual clip that we're going to listen to is only about 30 seconds long, and it's the very end of a scene where the protagonist, played by Melissa O'Bowen, who is Grace in the movie short film Grace, she has a bit of a nervous breakdown, and after some self-care is reaching an equilibrium point again. But there's a twist of sort of the ugly understatement or the undercurrent, and this leads to a scene change. So this specific clip, you're not really going to hear dialogue. It's just the music. But I want you to think about the internal turmoil that she is in when you hear this clip.
Okay. So this is, say again, it's a short film or is it a feature?
It's a short.
It's
Yeah,
a short
it's
film,
about
and the title is Grace.
Grace. It's not coming out till May.
Okay.
And they're going to have a premiere here in Charlotte in the theaters.
Okay.
But it's a psychological drama, sort of murder mystery.
Okay. What would the segment be called, do you think?
That would be called Grace's Return to Equilibrium.
So that's yet another example of that soundscape kind of
Yes.
padding that we were talking about earlier, but then you've got it layered. So I'm just curious. I've watched some YouTube videos of guys talking about soundscapes and designing work like that. When you're doing it, do you start out with an initial kind of pad, and then do you start to add layers on top of it to create that feeling that you're looking for?
Well, with this, I started out with the bass, the double bass playing, because it sort of created this relentless kind of throbbing. And she has just had sort of a breakdown, and she lit a bunch of candles. Her son's missing and all sorts of stuff.
Right.
And so she is sort of like just worn herself down, and she's sitting there lighting a cigarette lighter, just sort of having this kind of afterglow of being worn out from being stressed. Right. So the double bass, and then I actually just played the string part in. Right. And just made it more dissonant. So, and I didn't resolve it at the end because it's a scene change. Yeah. Which goes to another scene, which she's sort of back to her malaise.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you're listening, you might not realize it, but a lot of us people who have home studios and do recording like Scott does, especially on the level that Scott's doing, you probably have a stockpile of what we call plugins, which are different sounds that you can utilize. So one of them, I'm guessing, you didn't go record real instruments. No. So let's just say you have the string set up for this?
Yeah. So
what other kind of sounds are you using on this particular one?
This particular thing it's called Albion One, and it's through Contact, which is a platform that you can load plugins into. Yeah. Albion One is from Spitfire Audio, which is in London, which is a big software.
I got some of their stuff,
Yeah. And so this is from just their, I think, legacy strings. And so I use a Valhalla Room reverb. I like things wet. And because they sort of blend the edges, especially in a pad kind of thing like this. So it creates that kind of melding, morphing, comforting.
Yeah, just for those listening, he's not just plugging in stuff and it makes the sounds for him. There's a lot of other things that go into it of creating that sound.
Yeah, I'm actually playing it with a keyboard.
Right.
So instead of it sounding like a piano, in this case, it's sounding like strings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a blend of the sound too that really works. Like you've got the strings underneath, you've got that little synth drone that's happening.
Yes. Yeah.
and the change of the chords that are happening.
Yeah.
It's really a pretty neat sound, that drone thing. And you were saying that Hans Zimmer, if you're not sure who Hans Zimmer is, he is a film composer, and probably most notably the Batman films.
Yeah.
Is
Tenet.
especially Tenet.
Yeah.
And
Lion King.
so he brought out a lot of different changes in sound. He's actually the big name. If you had to pick two people in film, it would always be John Williams and then probably currently Hans Zimmer.
Yeah. And actually, on a side note, I've actually been to the outside of his studio in Santa Monica.
Okay.
Obviously didn't get inside, but walked around and just sort of soaked up the vibe. But yeah, so he sort of changed the landscape of contemporary film scoring.
Wow.
Him and other people, but
Yeah.
Attica Ross and other people.
Fantastic. All right. What else did you bring?
Okay, this is another clip from the short Grace, and this is a snippet of Eli, who's played by Tyler Washington, who's the son of Grace, and he's gone deep into his thoughts to block out what is going on around him. This is an interrogation room with the detective, and we don't find out till later in the film that he knows a lot about what was going on. So he is sort of shutting down. So you're going to hear the actual audio of people talking, but the sound editor, not me, put it very filtered, meaning they took out a lot of the high frequencies and they added reverb to it. So it's sort of like it's inside his head.
Right.
And he's not really focusing on it. So I chose to bring him to his sort of comforting, not happy spot, but just sort of comforting spot, safe spot. And I chose to use a choral kind of arrangement with that.
Okay.
And it's very subtle. So
And what would you call this section again?
I would call this Eli's Inner Thoughts.
All right. Let's take a listen to Eli's inner thoughts from the short film Grace.
I've never seen him so angry. He just stormed into the house and screaming at us. I tried to tell him to leave, and he grabbed a wine pot, started waving it around.
That's a pretty neat scene. But I do notice I'm like listening to stuff, and I have the feeling the more I watch modern films, I'm going to be listening to the soundscape kind of music that's going on underneath everything now.
Yes.
Is that really more the current trend, that everything is going that way, or do you still have outliers?
Oh, yes.
lot of
There's
stuff.
Alejandro Desplat. I'm probably saying his name wrong. He's done lots of movies, and he is very melodic and very experimental and very innovative. He's one of my favorite composers. So there's still many people that are not really going this route. However, for me, I really enjoy it because I am primarily sort of leaning towards that psychological drama. However, there's another clip that we may or may not listen to that is sort of quirky, which is melodic. But so it really depends on the genre of the movie, or film.
Well, one of the things I recently comes to mind is the film composer Ludwig Göransson, if I'm pronouncing his last name correctly, who did The Mandalorian.
Yeah.
And he was using recorders to get that like Western kind of sound. So I mean, that's the standout for me. I don't know if there was a lot of soundscape design in some of the show, but I would have to go back and listen. I'm really curious when I go to watch films now. I'm going to have to really listen and see what's there. And you, the listener of the podcast, maybe the next time you watch a film, if you've listened to this podcast through and some of the things that Scott's pointing out, next time you see a film, you'll be like, oh, I've heard, now I hear this. And I think once you hear it, you can't unhear it.
Yes. And
it'll stand out more.
right. And also, once you start noticing little themes here and there, and then when they surface, it's almost obvious.
Yeah.
And another little technique or trope is that you maybe will hint at a theme throughout the movie, but then you won't get the payoff till the end, to that final penultimate scene, the climax, where
it finally comes out.
Yeah, where it finally comes out in its full glory. It's sort of like, you've been waiting, and here it is. Yeah.
So when you get these films to do,
Yes.
you said one you started earlier, one of the tracks you were working on, you were just reading the score. And you started to come up with ideas and write it down.
The script.
Yeah, the script.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I never really
said
finished.
Score.
Oh, that's fine. I never really finished my story, but where were you going with that? Sorry.
No, not a problem. I was curious, do you normally get scenes sent to you, that the film that you have to compose to this? And how does that work?
Okay. Normally, I would love to get what's called a semi or locked picture, meaning that they're not going to make any more changes, but that rarely happens. So what I'll do is, and this might be a good time for me to do a plug about this incredible platform called Frame.io.
Okay.
It is a platform that filmmakers use, and what it is you can, for instance, the director or the screenwriter or the editor, whoever, will send me a clip of a scene.
Right.
And so then what I'll do is I will compose to it. I will render it to an MP4. I will put it onto Frame.io, where frame by frame accuracy, any member of the team can make a note. Meaning they can say, oh, I love the way this is happening here. Oh, could you change this here? Whatever they want to say, and it happens in real time. So, for instance, this afternoon, later, I'm going to go to Frame.io, and I will be making those changes on a few things. So back to your original question was, am I given a script? And sometimes I am, but mostly I am giving clips.
So they'll just Dropbox you the video, and then you pull it down, pop it into your computer, check it out, and then start to try out different ideas of what you'd like to do.
Yes, exactly.
How long generally do you have to turn around stuff?
That once again depends. This feature that I'm going to be doing in May is a documentary called Constructing Whiteness,
right,
which is a very heavy subject about the abuse and neglect of people of color in the United States throughout history, started with Jamestown. And it's going to have a lot of big names. But so with that, the turnaround is I've already done like a 10-minute teaser for it, which they used to gain more funding. However, it will be filmed in May. I can start composing, but it probably will not be finished edited till the end of the summer, so I can have a lot of time. In the meantime, I'll be working on another feature. So on the other hand, this Grace that I'm doing now, I've told them that I will finish it by Friday, which I fully intend to.
But does that mean... Well, I guess it's depends on the film. So if you get a clip, you don't finish. They say, "Can you get this back to me within a week?" And then you send it back, and then you take their input and make changes to whatever you need to get changed.
Exactly.
Okay.
So then, so in other words, using the Frame.io concept, so they're giving me notes. For instance, did the opening. They liked the opening, but they wanted me to shift something over so it didn't conflict with something else. Mm-hmm. So with me, it's just literally a matter of just shifting something over and working around it. And then I render another MP4, send it back up to them. They either have more notes or they sign off on that. And then what I do at the very end is they give me the entire movie, and then I place all of the different clips in their proper spot. And then they, depending on the filmmaker, sometimes they want the entire movie with one WAV file from the beginning to the end of the entire soundtrack.
Interesting.
And sometimes I do some sound design as well, so I put that on a separate track, meaning, door slams or whatever.
So if you do a film from beginning to end with a sound file, are they sending you the whole film in one shot for you to do everything with?
Good question. Sometimes I get segments, but when everything is signed off, meaning that they're pleased with all of the 50 cues that you did or whatever, then they send you the entire movie. Or, I don't think there's one answer. I think sometimes you get the entire movie, sometimes, because see, it used to be there would be reels. In
Right.
other words, you'd have reel 1, reel 2, reel
Right.
3, but now with digital technology, you don't really have that. I mean, you have acts, but you do not have, with the way that the action or the actual story
Right.
plays out.
Well, I guess my question is that if you are working with certain reels or cues,
Yes.
they send you a cue and you compose music to that, and then a week later they send you another cue,
Yes.
and a week after that send you another cue. Is that difficult to make the music fit from cue to cue so that it is a cohesive stylistic or sound to fit it together, as opposed to because you could be working on 3 different projects.
Yes. So,
and now you got jazz in your head for this
Yeah,
project,
yeah.
and this project you're bouncing back and forth to moody soundscape. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
So-
So basically, that I should have probably said this a long time ago. From the beginning, I established sort of a sonic palette of sounds that will be the identifying factors, the world of the soundtrack.
How so?
In other words, for this particular movie, Grace, it is strings, it is some drones, it is some vocal sounds, it is some sound designy stuff.
Right.
And so piano, guitar. So depending on what the project is, the unifying factor is the palette of sounds. It's also the thematic development. And the thematic development doesn't necessarily have to be a melody. It could be a signature sound, or it could be a a rhythmic motif or something like that.
But what are you basing that on? Like, if you are getting 1 cue a week, how are you basing on what? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Are you getting this? Are you getting the script so that you can read through and go like, I envision this, or
Yeah.
oh, they
Okay.
told me it's going to be a Western or a murder mystery. I already know if it's going to be a murder mystery, these are my stock sounds that I would really think about using because this is effective for this. I'm not going to go use, a blues guitar for this. It's not really something that fits.
Yeah, so basically, once again, I don't think there's really one answer, but it'd be nice to be able to read the script and really get the arc of the whole story.
Yeah.
Because usually, obviously, the script is first before they shoot it.
Yes.
And so then you can start to sort of experiment with your palette of sounds.
Okay.
Or your instruments. And so then you narrow that down, and then you say, well, you're only going to get one clip here and there, but you might establish some themes. Like, for instance, in Torn, I had the Peter sympathetic theme. I had Sheriff Mike's theme when he was sympathetic towards Peter. I had some different themes that were more sound design themes when Peter was going on his downward spiral. So they would surface in different parts of the movie, and they create that cohesive whole through the sounds and through maybe the development of the themes, and sometimes merging the themes together. I like doing that as well.
So is it safe to say if you get a film, you don't have the score, the script off to read the whole script and get an idea? I'm guessing they're going to give you a synopsis of what the film is about.
Yeah, there's like a log line. Yeah.
And then maybe based off the first cue that you get, that's going to be your basis and be like, okay, this is all I have to work off of besides the synopsis. And that's going to establish the identity and the sounds I have based on this first.
Yes, because basically what you're doing is just like when we put on the programs with the kids at school.
Yeah.
We're creating magic.
Yeah.
We're creating a world.
Yeah.
So that sound palette is part of the world that you're establishing. So you're establishing that world from the first sound that you're making. And it may go counterintuitive to from what you might think it would be. Hans Zimmer's sort of famous for doing that. He saying, well, with Dune,
Yeah.
you would expect this, but he did that.
Yeah.
So that created a whole new paradigm to be thinking about.
Yeah, he's got some spectacular sounds from that film.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
At least the first one. I haven't seen the second one yet.
The second one,
Don't give it away.
yes. Okay, I won't.
But-
But anyway, the second one, according to my son, is far better than the first.
Yes.
It's more established.
I saw Steven Spielberg said something like, this is the greatest science fiction movie ever made.
Wow.
So, I mean, coming from Steven Spielberg, that's pretty high praise. I haven't seen it, but I heard it's up there. But then I saw reviews, and I'm not going to knock it because I really enjoyed the first one, who said it's up there, but still the best trilogy that some reviewers have said is still the Lord of the Rings. Trilogy. It's 20 years later, that film is still holding up.
Yeah, Howard
and
Shore.
that's got some wonderful music in it as well. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Do you know who did the music?
Howard Shore.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's got some fantastic stuff in it.
There's so many incredible composers everywhere.
I wanted to go back and just ask you a quick question.
Sure.
Well, this is what we're doing the whole time. So, so now that you've been in doing this film composition, how many years have you been in?
Well, in earnest, maybe 2.5.
2.5 years?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. But you got now how many films under your belt?
Probably about 10.
All right. So a couple of years in, you got 10. You've got experience.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have an idea now that you're a couple of years in with more experience of what you want to do right away, as opposed to when you first started going, oh my gosh, what did I do? I have no idea what, because inevitably, I think no matter what you're doing, when you first jump into something, I don't care if it's performing on a stage or if it's writing music or writing a song, sometimes there's that overwhelming feeling of when you're creative, like, I think I bit off more than I can chew.
Yes.
At the initial start, once you kind of get into the process, it's okay. But it's that initial did I bite off more? Do you now have a feeling like, okay, I've got these stock sounds. I know what to do for this. I know what to do with this. Whereas when you first started out, you may not have had that experience doing it.
Well, let me put it this way: it's always a learning curve, meaning that maybe I'm more comfortable with certain areas, but now there's other areas that I'm not comfortable with. So, but I do feel more confident in trying to create a vision and trying to. But the number one mantra that I go by is that story's number one, and that I'm telling stories through music. So with that in mind, there's a big tradition that comes before me. It takes a village. So I listen to a lot of things. I listen to what this film composer did here, and so, or I'm really fanatical about listening and going, wow, that sounds so cool. What was that? Why did it sound that way?
Right.
What did they do that made it sound that way? Because it comes from the feeling.
Yeah.
And then you backtrack rather than the technique and rather than the musicality or shreddage or any of that. It's the feeling that it creates. And sometimes something super simple and it's a sound and it's a minor third, descending, or some, and it just creates that sort of melancholy sound. So, in answer to your question, things are simpler, but yet it's sort of like you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And so as you learn more stuff, you realize the more that you do not know.
There's always something that pops up.
Yes.
Is there something that you are more comfortable with now that when you started you were uncomfortable with?
There's a certain thing, a lesson that I learned the hard way, and actually Fred Story was the one that helped me with this, is that if you are doing things linearly from left to right, from first, second, third, and then you change the tempo, or you change mainly the tempo, and then you have to go back and change the tempo of something before, it's going to change the tempo it's going to change the placement of the music in front of it. So one thing I've learned to do, which is a little more time consuming, but saves you in the end, is to do each individual cue on a different project. And then record, and then once that's signed off on, then record that to audio. Once it's not going to change, then put it in the master timeline. So it's just little logistical things. There's a lot of logistical things that I have yet to learn. Sort of the I'm still very young in this game. I've only done a couple of national things, but I'm continuing to do it. So, and I'm hoping to learn more of the tried and true things that a lot of people that have maybe been to film school or been to scoring school, they just do as a natural practice.
So what, just out of curiosity,
Sure.
You're on a project.
Yeah.
What's the percentages of the musical aspect of the project? So how much 100% of time you got this project, what's the percentage of time that you're devoting to creating the music? What's a percentage of the time that you are dealing with the technology of getting stuff set up, dealing with the director, establishing the interpersonal relationships? So how much is devoted to the actual composition? When there's a whole and I don't mean that in a bad way.
Yeah.
If somebody's listening, it's like, well, he should be devoting 100% of time. No, because if you own a business, you have to order let's say it's a restaurant, you have to order the business, you have to manage the people, you have to look at the budget, you have to manage the customers. I mean, there's a lot that's devoted to it. How much a percentage of the time would you say is on a project is devoted strictly to you in the studio creating the sounds, putting the music together?
I am going to say just a wild guess, maybe 75%, because I am taking direction from the director, let's just say as a director. But also I'm having to deal with, the technological issues of getting the sounds and all that, and that leads to workflow because I do have certain things automated and certain things that I have sort of in templates, which make things easier. So I would say 75% composing, 25% logistics and communication with the director, et cetera.
Interesting. What's your platform of choice for recording?
It's Logic.
Okay.
And there's pros and cons. I mean, Logic is very seamless, very, very strong, but it's Mac, so Mac is very expensive.
Yes.
As far as if I had to do it again, which I may at some point, I might move to Cubase because Cubase is super good, and Studio One's super good as well. I know a lot of people that do Studio One, but Logic has sort of become the new default DAW for the industry, but that's not the reason I use it. It's just because I've been using it for a long time now.
Is there a platform that's better for using it for film composition? Because I mean, once you kind of get used to one DAW, and digital audio recording, digital audio workstation for musicians who record, is there one that's better for film?
From what I hear and from what I just sort of know from doing what I've done, I really don't think it depends on the DAW. It depends on how you use it.
Okay.
I do know the Pro Tools is really good for audio manipulation.
Yes.
It's not that great for use it for movies. But
Yeah.
a lot of times people use both.
Yeah.
They'll start out in Reason or Ableton Live or
Right.
Mark of the Unicorn
Yeah.
or Digital Performer or Cubase or Logic, and
Yeah.
and then they'll move to delivering stems, which is a whole nother thing.
Yes.
To using Pro Tools.
Yeah, I mean, I started on Pro Tools, and there were certain things that I just got frustrated with them. And then a friend of mine had said Studio One, and I checked out Studio One, and one of the things that made me move to Studio One, I don't know if it's still a thing because I haven't had to use it in a while, but I had called them a couple of times, and a real person picked up the phone.
Yeah,
like there wasn't.
Imagine.
Yeah, it wasn't and this wasn't even that long. It was only a couple of years ago, and they helped you with your problem.
Yeah.
As opposed to calling. The one thing you used to be able to do that with Pro Tools, but then after a while, when I believe Avid took them over, they went to a subscription platform for help. So you had to pay $100 and you could get X amount of time to help. So when you called, you would be prompted to go, well, you need to go to the website and you need to do this before we can even help you. And I get that at some point you're so huge, you're the world over. You can't have somebody on the phone for free all the time, fielding issues. But at some point that's like, you just get too big where it's
a deal
not
breaker.
helpful. Yeah. And they're so I just can't get the word out.
Proprietary.
Thank you, proprietary. That they have their iLock, and you can only use it with this, and and it's like, ugh.
Yeah.
It just gets nonsensical after a while. You just I don't want to deal with this anymore.
Yeah.
I want to do something simple. So now I've been using Studio One for a number of years, and I'm extremely happy with it. And I know it probably better than I ever do Pro Tools. So.
And once again, you answered your own question, because I really think it's whatever you're comfortable with, whatever you have the best workflow with. And I think that's the answer of the game, because at the end of the day, you want to be spending more time in the flow state as opposed to dealing with technology and all the other stuff.
Yeah, and when you're dealing with it, the other thing is that once you become comfortable in one workstation, it's not that much of a switch to another. Like once you kind of really get used to it, I'm talking after a number of years, I'm used to Studio One. Oh, I know how to work a workstation. Mm-hmm. Not so much I know how to work this specific one, but I know how they work, and I know this is this. If I click this, this is record, and this is how I put in a plug-in, and this is how I do this. Once you kind of get used to all that, it's just figuring out how you do everything that you know how to do somewhere else.
And a lot of the shortcuts are sort of the same.
Yes.
And, it's sort of like people, not me, but my wife, she speaks 3 different languages. And so once you learn one language and then you learn another, then you learn another, you see the similarities, and it becomes easier to just start another language. So
absolutely.
It's sort of like switching platforms is the same thing.
Yeah. Well, Scott, it's been wonderful having you in today, talking to you. Getting to know you a little bit more. You've got the new project Torn coming out. When does that come out? Do you have an idea?
Actually, Torn's already out. It was in the Charlotte Film Festival, and it's had some screenings, and the producers up in New York are trying to gain distribution internationally, but it's in the hands of Lionsgate right now.
Wow.
However, it all depends on how things pan out.
Okay.
So it will be on Amazon Prime at some point in the future.
You got to let me know when so I can watch it.
Yeah.
Awesome. So if we want to get in touch with Scott McLaughlin and find out more about what you do and check out, or if somebody wants to hire you for film work or sound media, some composition stuff, how do we get in touch with you?
I have a website. It's www.scottmclaughlinmusic.com. And my last name is spelled McLaughlin. Awesome. Sort of like Mac, Laugh, Lynn.
There we go, spelling it out for us.
Yeah.
All right, well, thanks again Scott for coming in, and you have a wonderful rest of your week.
I just want to say thank you so much for having me, Matthew. I really enjoyed it, and more power to you. Peace and love.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to episode 74 of the Queen City Music Podcast, and I hope you'll go back and check out past episodes. And if you can be so kind as to leave a review, I'd greatly appreciate it. You can find the QCMP on all your favorite streaming platforms. As always, if you have an idea for an episode or would like to be a guest on the QCMP, reach out to me at queencitymusicpodcast@gmail.com. Also, check out our local partners, Records on the Wall at rexonthewall.com, Reporting from 20XX at reportingfrom20xx.wordpress.com. Queen City Live at Instagram.com/Queen City Live Music, and Charlotte New Music at charlottenewmusic.org. Until next month, get out there and check out some of these fabulous local musicians.